Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. We are recording today's episode on early Monday morning, November 10th, and we are here to recap the first weekend of the college basketball season. Obviously, we are one weekend as we record here today. Heck, it was almost exactly this time on last Monday morning when the season was tipping off the Field of 68 opening day marathon. That game was Winthrop and Queens played at the Rock Hill Sports and Events Center in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And now here we are 7 days later with plenty to talk about, several takeaways from the first week and the first weekend of the 2025-2026 college basketball season. And of course, throughout this season, this podcast is going to be the best way to stay up to date with everything that's going on. So please make sure you are subscribed to us here on YouTube at the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitter and TikTok at BRamseyKSR for additional conversations throughout this college basketball season. But as you look to recap this first weekend of college basketball, I think the first game that you obviously have to talk about is the Saturday afternoon contest held at Madison Square Garden between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the St. John's Red Storm. Most people had St. John's ranked ahead of Alabama coming into this year. The Johnnies actually were even a team that some people had as high as number one. I believe Gary Parrish at CBS Sports Network had St. John's as the number one team in his top 25 and one going in to this season. Alabama was a team that people liked the guard play, but kind of wanted to see it, how it all fit together this year with Coach Nate Oates' squad. They were picked, third, fourth, somewhere in there in the Southeastern Conference, I do believe. And wow, did they make a statement on Saturday afternoon in New York City. I think that it's probably still fair to say, just because Florida's the defending national champions, that Arizona's opening night win over Florida is maybe still the most impressive win of the college basketball season. But Alabama now certainly has the second most impressive win, I think, going into Madison Square Garden and beating St. John's on Saturday 103-96. I think there's a few different lenses in which to look at this game. First, you have to talk about the guard play for Alabama. Now, let's get all caveats out of the way. It was just one game. It's early in the season. We all know that. We're not here to just blatantly overreact to any one contest, any one result. But I do think it's fair to say that any conversation that we were having in the preseason about best backcourts in college basketball that didn't include Alabama probably were short-sighted. And again, one game. But Aiden Holloway, outstanding on Saturday, finished with 21 points and 4 assists. He was 9 of 18 from the field. Didn't shoot it well from three-point range necessarily, but was excellent getting to the rim. Did not turn the ball over, which was huge for Aiden Holloway in that one. Alabama actually only turned it over 7 times against St. John's, which was very, very impressive. But the player of this game was LeBaron Philon, who really proved himself. But this was a guy that probably was going to be a late first-round pick in the NBA draft after his freshman season, but decided to run it back as a sophomore. 25 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds for Philon against St. John's. He was just absolutely outstanding. And then off the bench, Latrell Ratzell, now healthy for the Crimson Tide, 4 of 8 from deep, 17 points for him, 3 more assists. The playmaking in this backcourt, obviously the shot making, with those 3 guys combining for whatever that is, that's 42, that's 63 points between those 3 guys. I'm going to go ahead and go on record when those guys can score 60 plus points between the 3 of them. Really, really good things are going to happen for Alabama this season. And then Taylor Bowen in the front court. This is a transfer from Florida State that they got in the offseason. A super versatile 6'9", 6'10", kind of thinner, more athletic 4-man. He hit a big three-point shot late in the game, but also had 9 rebounds, 4 of those coming on the offensive end for Alabama in this one. A couple of blocked shots, finished with 17 points. He was outstanding along with Aiden Sherrill in the front court. You got a couple minutes out of Noah Williamson, but it's mostly going to be Aiden Sherrill and Taylor Bowen this season. And those guys at least looked good enough on Saturday that with this explosive backcourt, I think that now Alabama really elevated themselves to SEC contender status, Final Four contender status. Like, this is a top 10 team in college basketball based on what I saw on Saturday. It is you cannot help yourself, even while trying to not overreact, but to be excited about the Alabama Crimson Tide and the way they looked, putting up 103 points at Madison Square Garden again, especially because you get that Aiden Holloway game that you've been expecting now that he's a junior. Played his freshman year at Auburn, obviously was with Coach Nate Oates last season. And then LeBaron Philon, if he can be that All-American type player that some people thought he could be going into this season, then wow, the ceiling is super, super high for Coach Nate Oates' squad in 25-26. But then on the other side, you have to talk about this from a St. John's perspective as well. We all think back to Coach Pitino talking about how Ian Jackson was going to be the next great St. John's point guard. And then not only is Ian Jackson not playing point guard, but he came off the bench in this game. Now, admittedly, he was pretty darn good, 14 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. But I do think that the backcourt is where the questions are going to be for the Red Storm this season. Who is going to be that point guard that steps up for them this season? Yes, typically you're going to be able to get some minutes from Idaho State transfer Dylan Darling. But again, you're relying on a Idaho State transfer to be kind of your only primary playmaker for this team. And I don't know if that's what makes you a top 5, top 10 team in college basketball. Now, we still love some of the other pieces. Like, Sellers is going to be a really good player for them this year. He had 14 points in this one, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, but turned it over 4 times. You had 3 turnovers from Ian Jackson. You had Ayo, who turned it over 3 times off of the bench as well. And I think that those are going to be the guys that are going to have to step up, because you know what you're going to get out of this front court. And boy, did they deliver on Saturday. Zuby Ejiofor, 27 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, but also 4 turnovers from him. Bryce Hopkins was excellent, especially in the first half of this game, 19 points for Hopkins. Those two guys are different sort of forwards. Then you add in Dylan Mitchell to the equation as well. He actually had 4 assists and 0 turnovers. He could be kind of that front court facilitator and playmaker for this St. John's team. But you're either going to need Ian Jackson to step up in a huge way, or it's going to have to be Darling getting healthy for St. John's, because I think there are some question marks on the offensive end. And then defensively, they're just not the same in the backcourt as they were last season. Now, I think Coach Pitino is going to just kind of enforce his will on this team, and that'll improve over the course of the season. But heck, they just gave up 103 points on their home floor on Saturday. So am I selling any St. John's stock? No, not necessarily. I still think that's a very, very good team. But some of the question marks that we had going into this season were borne out in their first, game against a big time opponent this season. And I do think that matters when you're evaluating these teams. Like in Alabama's first real test, they could not have been more impressive, and they maybe answered some questions that we had in the preseason. Whereas St. John's, not that they weren't impressive in many ways, the front court outstanding. Ian Jackson played well. They had opportunities to win this game against a really good team, but some of the questions that they faced in the preseason were kind of confirmed a little bit, at least in, again, a one game sample size. But certainly in the game of the weekend, again, Alabama beating St. John's 103-96 at Madison Square Garden. I think, especially from a name recognition standpoint, the second game you have to talk about is Michigan State hosting Arkansas and winning 69-66. Certainly a very different style of game on Saturday night at the Breslin Center compared to what we saw at Madison Square Garden earlier in the game. But you're really seeing some of these guys step up for Michigan State this season. Junior, now Cohen Carr, he's always been one of the most physically gifted, athletic guys in all of college basketball. 15 points and 7 rebounds for him on Saturday night. Jackson Kohler, now as a senior in the Spartans front court, 10 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists for him. But the story of this one, off the bench, forward Cam Ward for the Spartans, 18 points, 10 rebounds, double-double for Cam Ward as a freshman. We're going to talk more kind of big picture about the freshmen across college basketball because that was honestly the story of the first week of this season. But just an outstanding performance for Cam Ward off the bench in what is going to be a very, very strong Michigan State front court this season. But then I thought down the stretch, yeah, Jeremy Fears only scored 4 points. Heck, he did not have a field goal in this game. But honestly, the kind of the veteran leadership and playmaking of a sophomore Jeremy Fears versus a freshman Darius Acuff, I thought was the difference in this one down the stretch. Now, Darius Acuff, the box score looks better 16 points, 6 assists, only 1 turnover. Jeremy Fears, 4 points, 9 assists, 3 turnovers. But there was just some decision making and kind of getting guys into the right spots late where Arkansas's offense sputtered a little bit, like we saw, even going back to his last couple years at Kentucky, where late in games, like where is the execution for the Razorbacks? And I think that reared its ugly head a little bit in this one late in the game as well. The last possession was just kind of a disaster for Arkansas, really the last couple. Trevon Brazil really struggled in this one, only 3 points for him in 16 minutes, battled some foul trouble, certainly, as did Nick Pringle. But you're going to have some more guys besides the freshmen step up again. Acuff, 16 points. Malik Thomas, 16 points off the bench. In this one, those two guys are outstanding. Those two guys are going to win them a bunch of games this season. And those are kind of old school superstar freshman guards that Coach Calipari over the course of time generally is really good with. You got 13 points from now a veteran upperclassman, DJ Wagner, which honestly sounds weird to say just because we've all been following his career for so long. But I do have some questions about this Arkansas front court. I think that they're going to have to prove themselves. Like, can Trevon Brazil really make that leap now as a senior to be at least a borderline All SEC caliber type of guy? You're going to have to get something like Carter Knox can't play 18 minutes and only take one shot. That's going to be tough for this team. But I worry a little bit about the front court. And I love the roster. I think the top 7 or 8 for this Razorbacks team is really, really good. And normally for a Coach Cal team, that's when his teams are best, is when he knows that rotation and they're super good and talented among those 7 or 8. But, you obviously leave yourself susceptible to an injury once again. And then, guys not playing well on a given night. They essentially played 7 guys or no, 8 guys, excuse me, on Saturday against Michigan State. And is that going to be enough over the course of the season? So honestly, I think unfortunately for Michigan State, the story of this one probably is more on the Arkansas side coming out of it. But again, it's 2 freshmen early in the year. Nobody's going to tell you that more than Coach Calipari going into a tough place to play like Michigan State. But I was impressed with the Spartans, and I do think that this is a team. Heck, one of my hot takes in the preseason college basketball manifesto that I write every year was that Tom Izzo was going to retire after making the Elite Eight this year. Just as I do really like Jeremy Fears, excuse me, with the ball in his hands in the backcourt, and I trust that front court. I love Cohen Carr now as a junior. I think this is a team that can surprise some people if they can figure out just some semblance of shooting 1 for 14, like winning a college basketball game against a team as good as Arkansas in 2025 while shooting 1 of 14 from 3 is hard to do. And I don't think that you can sustain that throughout the entire season. But if anybody can figure it out, it's Coach Tom Izzo. They have a big game in the Champions Classic coming up, not this Tuesday, but next against the Kentucky Wildcats. So that'll be the next big test for the Spartans. Another big game coming out of the weekend, certainly storylines again with the freshmen across college basketball. And that was North Carolina's win on Friday evening over Kansas, 87-74. Now, unfortunately, the news has since come out that Seth Trimble has been injured and will miss the entire season. Let me pull up a tweet real quick just to make sure I get all of this right. The news broke late Sunday evening, but Seth Trimble, why am I having so much? He broke his arm in practice. He's going to undergo surgery and will miss at least 6 to 8 weeks. So I guess not the season. I misspoke on that, but certainly that is a game changer for the Tar Heels, because this is a guy that he had 17 points and 8 rebounds in their win over Kansas in their opener this season against Central Arkansas, 12 points, 4 assists in that one. So he was going to be a really big piece of this team that doesn't have a whole lot of margin for error. And it's going to be interesting now. They get a big time win over Kansas. They're 2-0 to start this season. But if you're missing Seth Trimble for 6-8 weeks plus, what's their resume going to look like at that point? Is it going to be kind of too late to make up the ground? Who knows? But one thing we do know coming out of Friday night's game is that Caleb Wilson talked the talk. He walked the walk. He is one of the best freshmen in college basketball. And again, we're going to talk about them from a big picture standpoint a little bit later in this episode. But 24 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists for Wilson. He was 9 of 12 from the field, is dominant around the basket. He's so athletic, so strong. He's an excellent defender as well. I loved him throughout the evaluation process of grassroots basketball. Watch him at Peach Jam, all this. I mean, he's a winner. Not completely dissimilar to Cameron Boozer and the Boozer twins in terms of the amount of winning that they did at the prep level. Also got Henry Vassar, 20 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists in this one as well out of the front court. So this North Carolina front court is in a really, really good place. But now with Seth Trimble going down, man, what is this backcourt going to look like going forward for North Carolina? On the Kansas side, Darren Peterson did his thing per usual, 22 points, 3 assists for the freshman guard, but then just not a lot of help around him, either from the front court or the back court. And that was the concern once again going into this year. What's the shooting going to look like? Now, they shot it well in this one, 12 of 25 from 3, but they were better from 3 than they were from 2. That's not going to be like Florida Badunga going 4 from 9 from 2. That's not going to get it done. Melvin Council going 2 of 7 from 2. That's not going to get it done. 1 of 4 from Elmarco Jackson. These guys are going to have to finish around the basket at a higher level than that. Now, I think that North Carolina with their front court makes it hard on you, but Kansas isn't always going to shoot it like that. And you're just going to have to be better around the basket. And I do wonder, if you look back at the last couple of years for Kansas, since they won the championship in 2022, like at what point does this kind of turn into the John Calipari situation at Kentucky? And I don't wish that upon anybody. I mean, Coach Bill Self is one of the best basketball coaches to ever do this at the collegiate level. But since then, you have a round 2 exit, and then a round 1 exit last season. You're trending in the wrong direction. You go from 28 wins to 23 wins, 21 wins. You're barely getting over 500 in the Big 12. If there's another season like that, which I think that even as good and as much of a star as Darren Peterson can be this year, I don't know if the roster around him is good enough for them to be much more than that. Like, at what point do we kind of start to have some conversations in Lawrence, Kansas? I don't want to have those conversations today, but I do. When you're looking big picture, at what point are we going to have some concerns about Coach Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks kind of moving forward in this era? But I also want to talk about the Indiana Hoosiers on Sunday. Man, maybe one of the most impressive, kind of from an individual team standpoint, one of the most impressive performances of this season so far. 100-77 at the United Center in Chicago over Marquette. So more or less, a home adjacent game for Marquette, and Indiana just absolutely dominated this one. Tucker DeVries, I believe, had 24 points in the first half, went on to score 27, 6 of 9 from 3-point range. Lamar Wilkerson, 6 of 10 from 3-point range, 23 points for him. Trent Sisley, the freshman, at 15 points off the bench. Sam Alexis, 13 points off the bench in the front court for the Indiana Hoosiers. 14 of 28 from 3-point range, 27 assists on, what are we looking at, 33 made field goals. If you followed the Hoosiers through Coach Mike Woodson era, this did not look like you were playing the same sport. And I don't want to sit here and pile on Coach Mike Woodson and what happened in the past, but holy cow, this Indiana Hoosiers team under Coach Darian DeVries, just a completely different style of basketball with Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker raining it in from 3. Tayton Connerway, 8 assists in this one, setting it up for everybody. Connor Enright added 5 assists in the backcourt as well. Now, you got a bunch of from Sissy and Alexis off the bench. I want to see more out of Reed Bailey. Going forward, he struggled a little bit in this one. The depth concerns me a little bit. Is Tate and Connerway good enough to be the playmaker for DeVries, for Wilkerson all season long? When you get into Big Ten play, we'll see. That there are still some questions about this Indiana Hoosiers team, but right now it's looking like they could be a really, really high-powered offense. And Lamar Wilkerson was a huge transfer portal addition, highly sought after. This guy could be one of the best guards in the Big Ten. And then we know, Tucker DeVries, when he was playing and healthy at Drake, he was an All-American type candidate. He's the two-time Missouri Valley Player of the Year for a reason. Those two guys are as good as anybody in the Big Ten and nationally. So that gives you an ability to do some really good things this season in Bloomington. I do still want to see how the rest of the roster comes together, but Wilkerson, DeVries, those guys are really, really, really good. So shout out to the Indiana Hoosiers for what they did on Sunday afternoon. Now, getting to the freshmen and talking about these guys on a kind of just a national scale and how good they have been. I was listening to the Ion College Basketball Podcast. Gary Parrish talked about this, and he brought up a good point that somewhere along the way, and we didn't have to do this as fans, as media, whatever you want to call it, we didn't have to do this, but we somewhat quickly identified this freshman class as a big three. It was Darren Peterson, it was AJ Dibanza, it was Cameron Boozer, and everybody kind of had their pick, their favorite. You had different conversations of, if I'm starting a college team, if I'm starting a pro team, if I'm going to win one game tomorrow, whatever it may be, and everybody had their own picks, and that was all fine and well. And admittedly, I still think those are the three guys at the top of the list, but I don't necessarily think we have to talk about this freshman class as a quote unquote big three, because heck, Caleb Wilson was making comments about it in the post game press conference after North Carolina beat Kansas in the game that he had. But even during the evaluation process, I was always kind of pushing Caleb Wilson to that level, and he's kind of beating his own drum a little bit now at the start of this season. I mentioned what Cam Ward did on Saturday for Michigan State in a win over Arkansas. Obviously, Malik Thomas, Darius Acuff for Arkansas belong in that equation. You have Malik Brown at Louisville, certainly Nate Ament at Tennessee, the Houston guys, Koa Pete, who we already saw at Arizona. Like, all of these dudes deserve to be talked about really in the same way. And yeah, whether you want to make it a big three or just say like, this is one of the best freshman classes that we've ever seen, let's just do that. And then, oh, by the way, Nicholas Avadalis at Virginia Tech in an overtime win against Providence at Mohegan Sun on Saturday. This dude, 33 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. Okay, yeah, he's from Greece. He's one of the best freshmen in college basketball, it looks like, at this point, too. And we continue to have more. Malachi Moreno had 18 points and 10 rebounds off the bench for Kentucky the other night. We continue to have more guys put themselves into this conversation. And I just think that, again, we don't have to. Trey McKinney had 21 points in a win for Michigan over the course or on opening night, against Oakland. It doesn't have to be the big three. It doesn't have to be Dibanza, Peterson, Boozer. Do I still think those are the best three? Yes. Caleb Wilson, Nate Ament, all these guys, Koa Pete, guy at Virginia Tech, they all deserve equal praise. And I do think that we can shape this freshman class as one of the best freshman classes in college basketball history right now. And it is the storyline coming out of the first week. They've been so fun to follow, and I cannot wait to continue watching them as the season goes on. Really, the only preview topic I just want to mention before we wrap things up today, Kentucky at Louisville coming on Tuesday. Now, I'll have a separate video here probably on Tuesday morning on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel, a little chalk talk, breaking down Louisville. So again, make sure you are subscribed to the show so you do not miss that episode. I know people enjoy those chalk talk, kind of more X and O style videos, so we'll get into that on Louisville tomorrow or Tuesday morning. Rivalry is back and better than ever because Louisville's really good. Kentucky's really good. Should be a top 10 matchup, I would say, when the new AP poll drops sometime today. on Monday, but you have Kentucky now ranked number 1 in KenPom, 11th in offensive efficiency, 4th in defensive efficiency. Louisville's flipped around the other way a little bit. 3rd in offensive efficiency, 35th defensively, 11th overall. They've beaten the brakes off of 2 pretty bad teams in South Carolina State and Jackson State, but they put 104 and 106 up in those 2 games. Obviously, Kentucky struggled a little bit, though they still won by 26 on opening night against Nichols, but then put up 107 against Valparaiso on Friday night. So now that offense is clicking. This could be a very high-paced, very high-scoring game at the KFC Yum Center in Louisville on Tuesday night. Anytime these 2 teams play, it's going to be electric, but now they're both really good. You had kind of the fun little offseason ribbing between Coach Pat Kelsey and Coach Mark Pope. It's going to be a heck of a game. I was asked on KS Board the other night what my worry as a Kentucky fan, somebody that covers Kentucky, is about Louisville. And I think that obviously there's always the chance that they just make a bunch of threes. We've seen Kentucky, maybe be questionable from beyond the arc at this point. So yeah, if Louisville comes out and makes 14 threes and Kentucky makes 7, it's going to be really hard to win, especially on the road. But honestly, my biggest fear, because I do think that Kentucky is good enough defensively that they won't allow that to happen, or I certainly hope they won't allow that to happen. But I do worry about just Mikel Brown having the ball in his hands so much and potentially being the best player on the floor. Now, do I think Denzel Albertine and different guys for Kentucky can do a good job on him? Obviously. But if you're talking about my worry, it's that Mikel Brown is 20 points and 7 assists on Tuesday night, and he's the best player on the floor, and something I talk about a lot, especially when you go on the road. I don't like my chances as the road team if the other team has the best player on the court, and I do think there's at least a chance that Mikel Brown does that, even as a freshman in this huge stage on Tuesday night. But something that I'm optimistic about from Kentucky, and I don't want to step on my other shows. I'm about to record a live Zoom action episode on the KSR YouTube channel, so go subscribe to that as well. But Kentucky and Louisville are actually very, very similar stylistically, offensively, and I think that'll only help Kentucky's excellent defense because they go against this every day. The pacing, the cutting, the zoom action stuff, the way that Ale Khalifa, is hitting all these cutters, that's not going to be foreign to Kentucky the way that it is some other teams that Louisville will play throughout the season, and the way that it is to a lot of Kentucky's opponents. So obviously you could turn that around and say that the strength, there lies for Louisville as well. But just quite frankly, I think that Kentucky has the horses defensively a lot more than Louisville does. Not to mention that the way that Louisville guards you, I do think that Kentucky's going to lay it up and have a lot of success around the rim against the Cardinals on Tuesday night. But again, more of that game to come. Big recap episode here from the first week and the first weekend of the college basketball season. We're going to have these coming to you throughout the season. So again, make sure you are subscribed to us here at the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show on YouTube. Please leave this video a like, drop a comment if you do feel so inclined, and I'll get back to you. And then again, also make sure you're following me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR and the same on TikTok at BRamseyKSR. Thank you all for being here. Hope you have a great week. And man, it feels good to be back talking about some college basketball. Have a good one.